Yiska, my friend, my boy, my long time confidant. We're here to talk about the Overwatch League. You know, Chengdu didn't beat. Chengdu took some maps. I do want to just lay that out there. We didn't win.
Yeah.
We didn't win.
Yeah.
But you know, I wanted to first get your looks on Chengdu. What are we thinking? I know that we have a bet, and this isn't like me showboating. I'm actually interested in what you think of them. You know, I think they've followed a very obvious, at least obvious to me, blueprint of what they were going to do, what they should look like.
Yeah.
What do you kind of think about them? Are they a little bit more surprising than you would have thought? Just your general take on the team so far.
So I think they're expectedly unexpectable, in the sense that the way they approach Overwatch. At the same time, I feel like their play occupies a way too big space in people's minds as to what is actually conclusive to winning games in Overwatch. And somehow playing entertaining Overwatch makes for successful Overwatch.
Sure,
but I don't think that's really true. If we look at their season so far, one thing that was certainly surprising was them winning against Guangzhou at the time. I think that is probably their most surprising game. Them winning close to against Mayhem sort of puts them where we expect them to be, I guess, sort of. Then the 4-0s come raining in. They lose to Toronto. This is all expected. Also, I don't want to overvalue their 2 points against Vancouver, who I haven't gotten through the entire series yet, but for the most part were almost... So, for instance, Anubis, right? How do you throw 5 minutes? How do you just do that? Just...
To be completely transparent, I haven't reviewed the games. I was kind of watching with half an eye, just gonna be like, oh wow, Chengdu's winning. Like, oh, they're up 2 games. Like, oh, this is pretty crazy. And you know, I think I really started to pay a little bit more attention, like on route. And I think I remember closing out with Nepal, but I'd say that I to be completely honest, I haven't reviewed it yet. It's kind of on the docket, but you know, big plays from somebody who we didn't really expect to shine on a hero that he has been. Ameng seemed to kind of overperform, I would say. I think this was a complete case of overperformance versus underperformance. I think the Titans came in. I won't claim that they were sandbagging, but I will say that I think that they're very unabashed, an unabashed, immature team. They're very young.
Yeah.
You know, you look at like they'll prepare when they feel like they need to. And if I were part of the Titans, I probably wouldn't take too much stock in Chengdu. They're a team that runs Wrecking Ball. You know, we can't really prepare for that, so we'll just, you know, run our game. And maybe it was a stylistic mismatch, but I think most of this was just a complete oh shit moment for them. Just, oh, they can, like, Bumper's not playing so high. Like, we actually have to not try, but oh, like, this is a different look. We were actually preparing for all these DPS comps, and I think it was a number of stars aligning to see Chengdu even come close to beating the Titans. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, also at the same time, you have to realize Vancouver was 5-0 at that time. The next team in pack is 4-2. So they were already locked in for first place based on their map score, which at the moment still, even after going so close, is likely to be better than what NYXL finished up with. They're likely to land at around plus 17, which would put them at first in the league. So I'm not sure how serious Vancouver had to take this serious.
Yeah.
Or actually did. The one thing that I will say is, where I slowly start to believe, is, and I'm not sure where that confidence lies, because from what I've seen when Jinmu is on actual DPS characters, he looks very sick.
Yeah, super flashy, but again, I think it's a matter of
I mean,
a lot of DPS
he could
or a lot of DPS from them, and a lot of teams not necessarily practicing it, right?
Yeah, I mean that, and I mean there, that what Tainu recently talked about, like this Diamond Widow situation in.
I'm not entirely too familiar, but go ahead.
Okay, so Taimu talked about how he repeatedly gets completely dominated in Widow DMs by Diamond Widowmaker mains because they have superior aim, right?
Okay.
That's Taimu, right? Like, sure. Not a guy with bad aim.
Yeah.
Basically stating, like, currently there is not too much to be said about positioning for DPS, also in Jinmu's case, because it's so different than what you would have to do in DPS metas. And from that, it's hard to say, but when you just look at his mechanics, he looks very sick, especially on Hanzo.
Yeah. Again, like, he's a player that will or can or has shown to identify very, very small and tight windows that he can, see and act upon, and sometimes those mechanics don't necessarily hold up. I think we've gotten a nice glimpse about what he can do when things go right. What we haven't seen is when things really go wrong and they can really get much better, right? If they again, for me he is very analogous to a young, like, Apex Season 1, Apex Season 2 Arhan. Looks really good sometimes. And other times,
that's the worst argument you could have made. For me to accept him into my heart.
He's not someone that I would say that I was probably one of the biggest proponents of Chengdu out of a lot of people, right? I don't think he's at that level, right? I don't think he's this crazy. We've gotten some really cool clips from him, and he's played really well. But like you said, once we get into a DPS meta, I think things that meter, that height meter, tones way down. You start to see him be this aggressive, very flashy player that, while is consistent, there's a consistency level of what he's trying to do, right? He's consistently just kind of going in, and sometimes he'll get that kill, but it's very telegraphed. It's very obvious. What Chengdu can bring out, and again, maybe the coaching staff has identified this. Maybe they've been able to work with him to address this. We won't know until we actually get a DPS meta. But yes, is he mechanically gifted? For sure. But there are times where he will just feed his pants off, and we haven't seen it yet. But I'm telling you, we're going to see it once we get a meta game where he can't just boost in with Pharah and barrage your backline for free and just take these really obvious kind of angles. I don't think he'll be as flashy as what we've seen so far. But again, good player. Again, to your credit, I don't think they have star players. I think they have very stylistic players. I think their coaching staff and the team is built around that style, but I don't think they have star level talent.
I also think the fact that they don't have Jashirin is probably a benefit to them. Because, okay, so if Rui had access to Jashirin, right? Sure. Would he then play him? I think that's bad. I think legitimately they would have won less games when they play full goats and try to play the meta.
Probably.
Than when they play their weird stuff. So in that sense, that current situation probably saved them from themselves. Unless, of course, I don't want to undervalue Rui in this, because we know he's a good strategical coach, right?
Yes.
But it's like, I think if they don't do that, this is basically like what they are doing makes it so they will never be the Shanghai Dragons of Season 1.
They'll always beat somebody.
In a 20-team league, you will always get somebody, especially if you play stuff that nobody else is playing.
Exactly.
I will also say, and I put it out in the article, I'm not convinced that, given significant, or not even super significant, but let's say, for instance, it became crystal clear in the next patch through, let's say the next PTR patch rolls along, massive Hammond buffs, it's clear he will be a starter in every meta composition. Now every team can practice it who is not in playoffs, and then also there's a little bit of off time between stage 1 and stage 2. Mm-hmm. I think that's already enough time for like absolute top performers in the Overwatch League to figure out these kinks and then probably outperform Arming on Hammond fairly quickly. I don't think he's like what he's showing. It is sort of pioneering, but I think it doesn't particularly, maybe his movement and mechanics, he could probably be a little bit advanced in that. Mm-hmm. But I think decisions making, he's already not like super amazing at that. No, never. And then if you give that to someone who has that and also can slowly grind into mechanics, which fair enough are fairly different from other main tanks, I think his edge that he could theoretically have isn't too far.
So everyone, I do kind of want to unpack that. I do think I will agree that Jichirin being kind of stuck in China with visa issues was kind of a blessing for them. It did kind of force them to play this weird style. I think that was always the plan, but I think the late addition of Jichirin, again, for those of you who weren't necessarily following the roster moves in the postseason, the roster for Chengdu did not have Jichirin in it, so it was just Ameng as the main tank, and there was a lot of questions around that. What is he really gonna play? Does he have history on these heroes? And he did, but it wasn't a ton. There wasn't a lot of meat on the bones there. There wasn't a ton to really look at and say, you know, is he a good Ryan? Is he a good Winston? He had some clips on Orisa that, you know, we could see like, yeah, he seems pretty competent. His team kind of works around him. It all looks good. But for the most part, he was like a weird pocket DPS, a diva player, and then adapted to Hammond when he came out and looked good-ish. Again, it was tough to really tell because we haven't really seen much in the way of Hammond play at the time, or we didn't at the time. Yeah. What I do think, and I mentioned this on Twitter, I think Maid had asked me about it, or had kind of like chimed in. I think they probably would have played Jichirin, but I also think that Ameng probably would have shared some playtime with Elsa. I think and historically, if my memory serves me, they would have played him on both Diva and Hammond as a flex tank. With just on certain maps, they probably would play Diva-less compositions with Wrecking Ball instead of Diva, and then just had that as their look. So you'd still have the Reinhardt, but you'd be substituting the Diva for the Wrecking Ball. That's kind of where I imagine this was headed, but because he was stuck in China, or still is stuck in China, they kind of were forced to go back to what they were originally going with, and maybe there was some ill-advised success, you know. It works right now, but yeah, it is strange, and I do tend to agree with you that the Korean machine will probably eat him up, or at least it'll be a test, right? It'll be a crucible if he can stand the test of the Korean refinement. And okay, so what I mean by that, right? Koreans tend to they don't tend to adapt and be very creative, but they'll take what you make and then just raise it to the nth level. They'll just beat you at your own game because that's what they're good at. They'll take what you have and just refine it down to the minutia and just beat you at it. So yeah, I do agree that if Wrecking Ball becomes super meta, that yeah, I think Ameng probably will be ahead of the pack, but slowly will start to fall to a lot of the mainstay Korean main tanks that we kind of know and love. But is there anything else about Chengdu that you like? Is there anything else that you don't like? Anything you could see possibly being a downfall?
Nah, I think we will see. It depends on so heavily on what happens in the future in the meta. I think even at some point, like One thing that could also suck probably for them is if Goat stuck around.
Sure.
And I think Chengdu is inherently a team that will always be good in the beginning of a stage while everyone is sort of everyone is trying to figure out what's going on, and then as people start to refine, that's just they collapse in getting to these higher levels, to that refinement, and also individual player skill I think doesn't have as high as a ceiling.
You bring up an interesting question there that I think is kind of fun to kind of think about and ponder on, because we have seen a lot of success from these expansion teams. Do you think that the parity that we're seeing in the GOATS meta would continue if we went to, let's say, a dive meta? Or maybe, whatever the next meta might be, do you think that if we just kind of remove the meta and be kind of meta agnostic when we talk about this, do you think that the expansion teams are going to be able to hold their own come next patch or next stage?
It is already scary how well they're doing that now, right? Like,
but I think that there's some like very easy pitfalls to fall into, where it's just like, oh well, they play contenders, and there's always kind of like an asterisk above them. If we remove that ability for that asterisk to kind of have a lot of weight, and to be fair, it does make a lot of sense. They have had experience on it for a lot longer. It does make sense. If we just completely throw that out the window, do these teams look as good? I some do, and some might surprise. I don't know. That's
a good point. Yeah, that residual. I brought it up before, right? If you look at the bottom teams right now, not a lot of players or coaches have contenders experience. It's just the way it is, right? For instance, Valiant didn't bring in any new players that played contenders, right? As far as I remember.
No, nobody that played contenders. They only signed.
They don't even. So. They don't even. That's also an interesting thing to me that I was thinking earlier. How important is a contenders or an academy team for you? How much information dissemination between academy and
we can talk about that.
That is very interesting to me. How that that can theoretically work. Washington is not doing well, and they don't have. Wait, don't let me lie. I don't. No, they have some players that played, but also not particularly successful in contenders.
Yeah, it was actually surprising. I don't want to super interject there, but it was actually surprising to me that because I'm not super familiar with North American contenders, I was very much focused in Korea and China at the time. But if Corey's supposed to be the best player on Washington, this team is not looking good. But continue.
Yeah, it's so basically, in my mind, for stage 1 at least, the worst thing you could have done as a team in the offseason, now in hindsight, is pick up bad veteran players from other teams. And that's sadly also the story of Florida Mayhem, isn't it? Where, it's also the Valiant. I mean, they are B teamers that were promoted to A teamers. They didn't have the contenders experience, and also they didn't know how good they would eventually turn out, right? Paris, is currently down there, but I think they still have 2 games where they can bounce back and even get a... Can they?
Do you think they will, though? They're still in the running. I don't think that the decision is really in their hands at this point. I think they have to, like, meet some extraneous circumstances and then have, like, some matches play out their way for them to get in. I'm not positive on that. Don't quote me, Reddit, but even then, do you think that they're going to? I'm kind of checked out on the Paris train. I was pretty high on them early because I figured they were supposed to do well, and then they're playing Shadowburn on Zarya because Soon just isn't cutting it, and even then, it's not looking good.
I would say the following, okay?
Sure.
I think it's very unfortunate for them that they meet Fusion late in the season because of the boombox. That's certainly an asymmetry in competitiveness they encounter in that situation. I would say they play Washington, right? So they're currently at -7. That's a -3. right? So, and then you win against Fusion. You're at +1 at 4-3 score.
Which,
That's not playoffs, I think.
4-3.
So
That's definitely it's putting yourself in that dilemma where
yes,
you don't really have it. It's not up to you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I think their problem really is that they lacked a good Zarya. I also think there's something going on within that team where there's a mumbo jumbo about who should play Zarya, and there's some internal questions there.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I don't think even during the Rogue era, where the end of Rogue, where everything wasn't falling into place, I don't remember Soon being as underperforming as he is here. I feel like for most of his career, Soon was at the very least an average player.
This is a very big dip.
Yes, that's probably the biggest in his career, which also makes me think that he will bounce back eventually. And
isn't that the hope of the thoughtful fan that just pines on the old ideas of the veteran players? Isn't that something that we kind of isn't that kind of cyclical?
Sure. I mean, okay, so there's something called the Lindy effect, right?
Sure.
And it's weaker in esports, but the longer something has been around, the less likely it is that it will disappear tomorrow, right?
Fair.
So in esports, of course, that is, yes, that it will disappear tomorrow. Yes, that is probably very unlikely. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about career landings.
Yeah, of course.
I will also say that Soon is not just a player that hard carried in his career, which he definitely did during Tracer eras. He is also a player who can play projectile. So he had a nasty Junkrat fall in the beginning of the season last year, and he also can play supportive-y roles. The problem is who's the carry on that team?
That's where this was supposed to be their ecosystem. This was the team that was built through goats. They lived and existed through the life cycle of goats. When we get to the other side, that's when things start to go sideways for me. Danya is good. I will say that I think a lot of people just kind of forget that he's even on this team. Where does the meta go? Where does this team fit within that meta? It's difficult to say. Who is the carry? I think it can be Soon. You definitely can always just put your eggs into that basket. Is Shadowburn even worth the wait? Not particularly super fond. Pharah, again, I'm on the record saying pretty wishy-washy, and I'm gonna say that again. It wasn't. It's fine. It's very okay. Is Genji? I don't know. Zarya still hasn't really done much anything. Yeah, I really don't. I don't know. I don't think they do all that great, to be honest.
I will also say I'm very surprised that Ben Bess is just set in stone. Apparently, I didn't think when this team was created that this would be the case at all, especially with Cloudy and how he performed on Giganti. That blows my mind, especially with Saita in the team. It's I don't know. I'm also not a fan of how Ben Bess is playing, but I will also say I haven't done my due diligence on his play in particular to have a strong opinion about this. It's just something that I observe on the occasion, but it's not a solid opinion by any means. But yeah, it was very surprising to me that Cloudy wasn't their starter.
I think you'll see a lot more Cloudy if and when Winston comes back into vogue. If we're going into perhaps an Orisa focused meta, I think you'll see Cloudy. I think this benefits his style of very slow, methodical, very Giganti-esque play, right? What this roster for Paris looks like, and when I saw how this roster fleshed out, I saw Nico, I saw Ben Best. from that, I kind of assumed they were going to play this lights out, super aggro style of GOATs where they're going to play in your face, try to force you to make errors, and then capitalize off of it, right? Just kind of swarm you, beat you with aggression. Not very elegant, I would say. Just kind of one track. Everybody's on the same page. We're going forward. It works out. Crew's very much in the same way, looking to make plays a lot of the time. Not very... there is calculation there, but for the most part, it seems like they want to play off of the back of Ben, Nico, and Cruz for my at least, and that's kind of how I conceptualize the team, at least first seeing it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the next, whatever the next meta is, whether it be Orisa, whether it be Winston, yeah, I do think you see a lot more Cloudy. But I wonder about the question that you had posed, who is their carry? I really don't know. I do agree that Zune could be, but I don't know. It's hard to say. But another team that is kind of hard to say, especially with recent events, is the Los Angeles Valiant. Obviously, not... I wasn't the super as positive as most. I think I probably, if we look at the community kind of power rankings, I think I was like the most negative on their placing. What's your take on this team? General thoughts.
I have a feeling, and I wrote this in the article as well. It was a major mistake to let either Demon, Gunba, or both go. I think that sort of killed the magic there, because we were talking about the intangible factor of Valiant all last season. Like, we couldn't really put a finger on why they're winning, right?
Sure.
A lot of that team had offers from other Overwatch League teams, and I'm very surprised how this thing turned out, right? How this, like, I think management also has to sort of say, okay, we dropped the ball on some of those substitutions. Soon comes to mind, even though he doesn't look hot on Zarya, but
sure,
you don't necessarily need to play him on Zarya, I don't think, in that current situation, but just to have him around would have been interesting. Finzi probably also would have. I mean, yeah, in this meta, it's hard. But yeah, he would have likely played a more decent Zarya. It is sort of rough, I will say. Also, their complete like mix around of like player positions, and then they still have internal politics issues, and then now once again you have to cut off your head coach, and that's not unusual for Valiant, right? Like around that time last year, they also let go of Cuddles.
Yep.
Difference being, he was cut at the score of 6-4, I think, if I remember correctly. So
it wasn't as bad as what it is now, but
yeah. Jesus, I'm not sure if you can even make playoffs at this time.
Yeah, seasonal playoffs. I think Monty during the Oversight episode actually brings up a good point that you're 0-7. I think you only play 28 games throughout the entirety of season 2. So you're already down a considerable margin for season playoffs.
Yeah.
When you look at the track record of the Titans going forward, when you look at the track record for New York historically within last season, some of these top teams aren't dropping many games season wide. So you're already down 7, and you're supposed to be this team's team that comes in and has this kind of magic factor to it.
Yeah.
How can you not cut the head off? As much as Moon might be one of the better coaches, how can you not when you're down 0-7 and you've I would imagine, again, I don't know internally, but when you look at a head coach, I would assume that they probably have a good piece of, a good say-so on how this team's built. And you're not winning, and it's not close. You're barely coming close against some of the bottom teams.
We also don't want to. That's another name that is often overlooked. though we probably have to name him now because he's the most successful of the old coaches, is Ooks, right? But of course, like, he was with the team at a different point in time, a little earlier, right? But my understanding is in the run up to the season, right? So I also like the new guys. Okay, Packing, I understand. Packing had some good success with Angry Titans. He also should have an understanding.
Should make sense, yes.
Dude, who's Dongsu? That's my ignorance, but this guy hasn't coached since he coached WGS Laurel 9 in January last year. Of course, we know, like, Liquipedia is not all-knowing, and he probably was doing something.
Of course.
It's just, dude, that is not a Ganba level coach, or not one you can expect to be that level. So, that in itself, Moon was never, from my understanding, a strong strategical coach.
Sure.
So where's your strategy coming from? And also, I will say, what Flame is saying, that cries wolf. It cries to me, basically like, my players are not satisfied with their coach, but they don't understand what goes into being a coach. I am justifying my own shortcomings in not firing him. So I completely, vehemently disagree with what he's saying. This is a coach meta. If you go 07 with a team that, from the hardware, is not that different from a team that was second in the regular season tomorrow, there is a large chunk on you. Yeah. Something needs to change. And I will say the same is probably true for Outlaws, because let's not forget, like, yes, their record doesn't look terrible at this point. Also, looking at how they could have won 2 of these Game 5 maps. Then again, that's also a coaching issue that you can't overcome this for now 1 season and 1 stage. But their schedule is also hilariously easy.
That's what I was going to bring up is, when we look at Houston, I think their power rankings kind of are a little skewed because of the strength of schedule that they had. If we give them a schedule like, let's say, Washington, are they a bottom team? Do they make playoffs? No, I don't think so. I think they absolutely get smashed out because this team just is a little lost. They have looked better. I will give Houston that. They've looked better as we continue. But even then, it's still weird calls, weird DPS comps on control that shouldn't be weird. But when you look at how uncoordinated and strange these ultimates are kind of flying out, I remember this EMP shatter on Busan that I think has kind of become a meme at this point. I think that sums up a lot of this, especially against the Valiant. A lot of this team's issues where it's either communication or it's just strange positioning or maybe an overly aggressive caller in Jake, where it seems like he's just way ahead of the pack and leading the charge. And I think having him within the team is good, but I think we need to turn down the volume there. I think we have to dial it back just a little bit because he's dying every fight. It feels like he's dying first. Every fight.
Yeah.
And it's without fail. And again, like, they brought up the stat on broadcast where they're like, oh, well, they lose every fight where Jake dies first. And it's like, well, when you die first, you're supposed to lose. So it's like, what?
Okay, let's check this. I can bring up Winston Slap real quick. Jake Overwatch. Let's see how often this boy dies first. Fight stats. Okay, Bastion is not representative. Brig, 15.5%.
First deaths?
Yeah.
This season or last season?
This season.
Really? Oh, I didn't know the stats were up. Well, cheers, bro.
Only for only for the first 3 weeks. So the last week is not incorporated yet, but Hanzo 14%. On Hanzo, dude? Like, okay, that's 6 minutes though. Yeah, mostly it's Brig. So let's actually see. So who's a good Brig? Let's put Profits. Let's put
Take Huxall.
Huxall.
I'm trying to think who plays Brig for NY. I have to see the names in front of me.
Yeah, dude. There's this
Libero,
phenomenon. Sorry?
I think it's Libero who plays Brig for them. It sounds really stupid, but when you have 20 teams and the meta just keeps shifting and you have like 15 DPS players, it does get a little crazy. So before you start to flame, check yourself.
No, yes, it's Libero, but I meant like the this syndrome where someone tells you, what is it? Can you help me? What is it? Mm-hmm. And your brain automatically goes, this is hard. You also don't know. Like, that's basically what happens. So,
yes.
Okay, so what the... Dude, okay. First death, least, Huxall, 6.3%.
Oh, so he's almost triple the first deaths.
Prophet has 8%. Jake has 15. It's nuts.
That's ridiculous. And again, for those of you who haven't either read Captain Planet's articles, read a number of articles that were posted on Winston's Lab, if you die first throughout multiple metas, that's roughly a 70 to 80% loss ratio. And it's not just in GOATs, it's in Dive, it's in most metas. If you die first, your team, on average, will lose. That fight, right? Not the game, but just that fight.
I mean, it's not fair because Stratus had one game of 11 minutes of break, but it's 35%.
Ooh, that is, that it is kicking a dead horse. The Justice aren't necessarily the best team in the world.
Let's see. Let's see.
Funnily enough, if we're gonna dive into stats here, because this is actually news to me. I didn't know the stats were posted, so I'm gonna have to send a very strongly worded message to Broy because he told me that they were he was gonna let me know when they were posted, but it's all in jest.
Friendship canceled.
What is interesting when we're talking about the Justice, what's going on with Guido? Why is he being subbed out for? I think it was Stratus on Zen. Why do you think that that's necessarily the case?
Oh, you want the juice?
Well,
I see.
I mean, if there's juice,
there's juice. So I don't want to say too much, but there's a situation with him.
There's no
staff.
digging at the juice. It was just like statistically compare them from that one match and just to see how they would go, because I was actually surprised with how Guido was performing. There was a couple maps versus NYXL that he was actually competing with Jonak in terms of ult charge. So it's not like this kid's underperforming. Why are we seeing this guy who's, he's been someone that I've been very questioning of, right? You're a Tracer player, Soul moved you to Zenyatta. Maybe you've had a Zenyatta the entire time. We just never saw it. Maybe you just had like this pocket Tracer that was better than Eska's. Who knows, right? Why are we moving him? This doesn't make much sense. And this is where I kind of like throw it to you. Do the stats kind of support that? Do you think they would? Do you think he's actually underperforming? I think if I had, not to play pseudo host here, I would actually look it up and see, because I don't think he's actually performing all that bad.
No, he's not doing that terribly. What I will say is, basically always when something doesn't make sense in who is playing and who's not playing,
there's always drama.
There is always drama in Overwatch League. You can pretty much say that. I can
say that as well.
Sometimes the problem really is sometimes there's tragedy that a team rightfully doesn't want to bring to the outside world, right? So in those cases, it's not too terrible to just not say anything, and then that's fine, right? Like, I don't see a problem in these cases. So let me see, actually. Okay, so Guido, he's dying first a lot.
Oh, he's going to.
But overall, he's not. He's one of the most solid players on his team, statistically. So. Yeah,
I don't think
again.
We're not digging at juice here. We're not. I don't want this to be about drama, but I think this shows that it's not based on performance, because he's performing well. statistically, it looks like he's performing relatively well for his team. So when you see him subbed out, that's got to raise some question marks, because he's not the reason this team's going poorly. If anything, and I think we'll probably agree on this, it starts at the front. It starts with Giannis.
Yes.
When you have a human pin bot on your team, there's not much in the way of protection for the backline. So of course, every fight seems like it's a loss.
Yeah, that entire front line has massive problems, and they apparently have massive problems seeing that or allowing themselves to see that.
Sure.
That in itself is, I believe, one of the biggest problems. Also, once again, this is a coaching meta. There's no...
That's where I was headed next is, okay, if we're going to say that Moon has to go, if Washington goes 0-7 in their first stage, do you think Wizard has to leave?
So the problem is the following, right?
Sure.
We know that based from the offers that we know, or not know, but we very heavily expect that Wizard Young got, that this offer was not a cheap one. He probably is paid pretty well. Now we also know that Washington doesn't have like a lot of money to spend around, just based on the players they picked up. So if you fire Wizard Young, I'm sure his contract has to be resumed pay. So now you're paying for a second coach, and then you also have to find a coach who does it within your budget, right? I'm not sure if Wizard Young would allow himself to be demoted and then you bring in a new head coach or whatever. I don't think that works. But yeah, they are in a strange situation where they probably have to ride it out till it's undeniably awful. And I mean, there's still a position where they win the last 2 games, I guess. It's not an 0-7.
Yeah, it's not a not point, reasonability that they just, can squeak out something. But the confidence is definitely not there, and it's probably not there for the rest of the season, if we're going to be completely honest.
Yeah, I will say, if they actually get a win against Paris, that could probably bridge the confidence over into next stage, at least. And then if they play, I don't think, like Florida could be close.
Florida definitely could be close. I think Paris should be fine. I think they have problems with Azaria, but at least they have a game plan. And they act on it. I think Justice has the beginnings of a game plan, and then once they decide to not stray away, but as the game progresses, we get into kind of the mid game where a lot of these early rotations, a lot of these set positions, can't or aren't feasible to hold. The team looks very passive. They look very scared almost. They don't look very confident when you're playing up against the likes of the Titans, the New York Excelsior, the Shock.
Who told me this?
What?
Did you say that you thought their pre-fight was good?
Yeah.
Or did I hear that from someone else?
I think against I did like a little study on them, specifically on like Kings Row, and I thought their pre-fight for A was very, very good. I think they had a good idea of what they wanted to do, and then didn't do anything about it. They would. I don't know why. I guess it's maybe because I'm watching a lot of MMA recently. But they'll get you on the ground, and they can get you there, right? They can take you down, but they don't know what to do after they get you there, if that makes sense, right? They can get into an advantageous position, and then nothing happens, and it's this passivity that just drags this team down, because they're really not. They could be competitive with the bottom tier teams. I'll say that. When I say not that bad, that's what I mean. They could be competitive with Houston. They could be competitive with the 0-7 Valiant that we've seen. They could be competitive with Florida. I don't think they'll be competitive with Paris. I think that for the most part, fundamentally, they should be fine. Paris, that is. They have their problems. Justice has much more severe problems. But coming back to Valiant for a second.
Okay.
Where do you think they go from here? Because, again, something that I will address in another video, their translator has been let go. What does that mean? Do you think they go full Western?
That's a weird one, right?
Mm-hmm. If I'm gonna have a Korean core, or if I'm gonna have some Korean players, I'm gonna want a translator, right? Maybe you keep Iziaki. Maybe you build
yes and no, because okay, so I think one justification that there could be is if you look at the names, most of them have, or many of them have been around since before Overwatch League started.
Sure.
Like Karif and Fate have been in the United States for like 1.5 years now.
Sure.
Cookie speaks solid English.
Definitely.
I guess what I'm saying is, do they need a translator at this point, right? Or can the teammates translate?
You think maybe it was specifically for the coaching staff they couldn't necessarily communicate in English?
I think there's a world where they say, okay, we need to free up resources in order to hire more important roles, maybe.
Okay.
So, for instance, something that has been missing in a lot of these teams is, for instance, a performance coach, right?
I thought they have one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Oh no, they do have one. Dr. Doug. Okay.
I can't say that I know too much about him, but it seems like the players are fairly receptive to him. I think I see some of the French players, tweet at him every once in a while.
Yeah.
So it seems like he's all right. Seems like an all right guy.
Yeah.
But what do you do with this roster? Do you keep the Koreans? Do you let them go? I mean, they've again
I think you have to keep faith.
They've been with the roster for a while now. They've been with this roster since Immortals, obviously pre-Overwatch League, like you mentioned.
But despite space, the Koreans are the best part about this roster
currently. But do you don't think that they can improve on that though? Fate, I will
with
agree.
Westerners?
No, not necessarily with Westerners. Not necessarily. That's where I'm headed with it. I think that I do think you bring up a good point about the translator, and could be for the coaching staff, or maybe that's just me projecting my kind of epiphany on you. So congratulations. I do think it's very difficult to argue Fate. Historically, he has been very, very good. This meta, it is team play oriented, so maybe he's suffering because of this team, the internal dynamics not necessarily working out in their favor. It is hard to argue somebody over Fate. But Kariv, there's a lack of direction there. I haven't seen much from him in the way of being a... It's hard, right? It's difficult. Enough about me. Where do you think Valiant goes with this? What do you think?
Are you asking what should they do, or what will they do?
What you think they will do? What, in your opinion, what do you think they will do? What do you think they should do? I make you GM. What do you do with this team?
Okay, so in order to prepare myself for this, I gotta go on the ayahuasca trip. That is LA Valiant management decisions.
Oh, okay.
But or tune it out. One of those two.
Straight fire Dante. I don't know if you caught that. I linked it to you. Where after Houston beats the Valiant, they do like a listen in. That was fire. I like that a lot. Continue though.
Okay, so agilities, you can't build your team around that. No. The most redeeming quality of him is that he has a big Chinese fan base and is a decent looking kid. I heard he is lazy, and I also see that he's not outstandingly good as people want me to believe.
Yes.
Kariv just needs to settle down, and I also think his ego doesn't match his skill, and I also think that he's just not more than average. Mm-hmm. Space is the player you want to build your team around easily.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe you can even ask him for some players that he wants to play with. Not sure how good of a decision that is. I would have to know more about space.
Mm-hmm.
as like a character, if he how he would judge that. I don't think Fate is a problem yet. I would definitely probably count on him to be back in future metas. Bunny is weird. Interestingly, Custa. So if I'm Dallas, the thing that Monty suggested, I would never take that.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he said that they would trade Custa and who else for closer? Custa, someone, and money.
Space.
Custa, space. It doesn't make much sense, and I don't remember his reasoning, so I don't want to like just openly criticize, but it didn't.
No,
it doesn't make much sense. Again, if closer's supposed to be this guy who is this main caller, and you just got RCK, why would you? Doesn't make much sense.
RCK is really not playing badly enough to warrant that trade. I don't think. I think RCK is playing fairly good.
Yeah. At least I would agree.
Yeah, no, I think they have a problem because so they already have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 player roster.
Mm-hmm.
There's really only 3 substitutions they can bring in, or they trade people. Now, I don't think. I mean, there's a world where they have to trade more desirable characters in order to free up slots because they need big changes. I think
definitely.
I even think that at this point you have to say, even if another meta came around, I can't even craft a meta where this roster would look good.
Exactly.
If Dive comes back, this is not good. Like, I don't know. There's just way too many old names, and I'm really continuously or increasingly losing respect for old names. I know this is sort of speaking against what I said about Soon, but I wonder really how long we can expect pro player careers to be in Overwatch in a game that is so radically changing, unlike any other esport I've ever been part of. It is nuts how hard this game changes.
We can talk about like how player burnout isn't necessarily, or at least it's been addressed with how season 2 is worked up, but and how the league itself, we have this massive off season, and we're trying to give players all the benefit of the doubt when it comes to their burnout. But when you're, like you mentioned, when the game is literally whiplashing you around from left to right to up to down, and forcing you to adapt to all these different situations, you're going to be chewed up and you're going to be spit out. So if that doesn't change, I don't think Overwatch becomes any different from any other esport that you're going to be used, and in a way you're just kind of going to get thrown out into the trash. So, but continue. Sorry, I just wanted to really echo that point because I thought it was actually quite intelligent.
Yeah, I also think this team doesn't really have a straightforward identity anymore.
No.
Like, if you look back to the Immortals days, I remember writing an article about this Immortal Brotherhood, like where you still had the 18-year-olds that finished online high school courses together. It was Agilities, it was Grim Reality, these types of things where it's more than just a narrative that teams can or fans can attach to.
Sure.
I don't see that. My Valiant narrative is, what I hear from the team is that there's constant infighting, and has been also already since season 1. So it's by the way, this is nothing unusual for Overwatch League teams. No. It's not even a terrible thing. I think it might be conclusive even to
success.
To success, but at the same time, like if it stops being conclusive, these pickups also in the off season, dude. What is Cookie going to do? That is the one position you didn't have a problem.
Yes. It was very surprising to me that Valiant was the team that approached Cookie with an offer. You put him on a team like Houston, for instance, maybe a team like Dallas if OGE wasn't necessarily working out. He's a player that should fit on a Western roster very well because he can speak English, very much in the same way that Arc should be on another roster.
Yeah.
Right?
But I'm not even convinced of his. I'm not even convinced of his individual skills as a main tank.
Yeah, that's where we've really never seen him fully tested. We've seen him a little bit on Seoul, and it was okay. Nothing, not too much in the way of, improvement or, kind of on par with Miro at the time. But yeah, not ever really tested for the most part. Winston was okay on MVP space, but again, they didn't really do much, and they still had some actually pretty good players, whatever that might, chalk that up to.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Also, by the way, I don't think the metrics by which you win on an organizational level changed this much between season 1 and season 2. So when we said, okay, we don't even understand really why Valiant is so successful in season 1.
Sure.
This stage proves to me that they didn't understand why they were successful. And apparently, by, via Negativa, we find out that everything they cut apparently is what made them successful.
Yeah. Honestly.
Yeah, it's hilarious in that situation.
So do you just completely just rebuild it? I agree. I think you take space. I think you take Izayaki. Seems promising. You just got him. He's just kind of come online and has proven to be a decent flex support, very above average.
Yeah.
Do you just build around those two?
Okay, so one attempt. I'm not sure if that even works. So
sure. Again, completely off the cuff. No.
Okay, what I do is I get a contenders team.
Okay.
I hopefully have given two-way contracts to some of those players where I didn't know what they would turn around, because what people don't understand, or apparently don't know, is there are teams in Overwatch League that don't have an academy team,
but they're still signing
that
two-ways.
Do have two-way players. Yes. So hopefully someone like a KSF is a two-way player. So you can offload them to that and still have them have playtime, right? Because Valiant, who know for a fact how taxing it is to not be able to play for an entire season, right? And I guess they wanted to circumvent that with having a 9-player roster. Probably won't work out that well.
Sure.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to develop some talent. I'm also bringing Koreans, and then I look at the remaining players, and maybe I want to try to free up some space by making someone a coach or something like this, or giving him a streaming platform. Because the problem is, it's very
stream it again.
I mean, the problem really is if you loaded up your team with contracts, there is really nothing you can theoretically do to get them out of your player limitation, I don't think, other than having them retire. And of course, you can't make them.
Can you not just buy them out of the contract?
Train them. I'm not sure if that works.
Okay, fair enough.
So they need new players, and I think you still stay with a hybrid roster. So you keep space, you keep fate, you go on the hunt for DPS players, because that is a big problem, and you go on the hunt for new flex support. I'm not convinced by Izayaki yet whatsoever.
Okay, fair enough. That's definitely an opinion that I haven't heard yet. So fair enough. Continue, please.
I like watching him. I think he's even a little bit below average in the Overwatch League. That's also a testament to the quality of flex supports we do have in the Overwatch League. Like, a lot of flex supports are very decent. So, for instance, if I tell you the name Shaz, what's your evaluation of Shaz?
Average to slightly above, I would say. Better on the Western side.
He looks to be a very good player. You know how absolutely insane statistically the difference between him and the top 4 Zens currently in the league, being Twilight, Shu, Violent, and Jonak is. It's nuts. The ceiling is incredible at this point in time. Izayaki is just, of course, also because his team is not doing well, but
sure.
He doesn't convince me at all. Like, even the highlight clips people post are completely underwhelming. I also think, dude, their Lucios basically are playing
they don't have a Lucio. They don't
have a... This meta is Lucio carry meta. So, for instance, a team like Boston Calyx hard carries that shit at times.
Yeah.
It's not just fusions. It's like Calyx is a carry in this meta of the highest order, dude. Like sometimes he hyper feeds into positions, but it is because he wants to do the big plays, right?
Yes.
And I think that at the time, I talked to coaches who were playing against Boston, and they said, okay, we don't shut down fusions. We shut down Calyx, and that's how we shut them down.
A lot of their tempo comes from a lot of the team's tempos. You look at Paris very much in the same way. I think you want to shut down Cruz, and yes, they're having Zarya issues, but you see, I'll do this on my own, but I would be pretty. I'd willing to put money that Cruz probably has a high first death ratio comparatively to league average Lucios.
Should I give
You don't have to. You don't have to. I'll probably do it later. But I would imagine that he's getting shut down, and it seems like he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just proves your point.
I think you need a playmaking Lucio in this in this meta. Yeah, Cruz has 10% first death.
What's like the average?
Which is that's hard to say at this. Yeah, I would have to look into it. But he also has pretty high first kill at 8%. Yeah,
definitely.
So.
I mean, he's good. It's just like this is the way that teams are starting to adapt to these very, very playmaking focused. That's not really a great sentence, but you know these Lucios that want to make plays, that they're trying to set their teams up, that are very much a caller for their team. Calyx not so much. I don't know necessarily how much he participates because it seems like Fusions might just be calling him in to like go for these plays, and maybe Cruz is. We know that Cruz is very vocal, but. It is interesting dynamic. It's fun to see that the Lucio meta is kind of a meta because you know historically this has been a payload cart stall bot. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I think I try to raise the awareness of that point in interviews and whatever, but sure. I still think this is an undervalued point that currently there's two positions. I think that are most important, and people think it's Zarya. I don't think it's Zarya. I think it's the main tank, and I think it's the Lucio that's currently making plays. And if these two are making plays together, then that probably most often leads to good success outcomes. Yeah, right. On average, there are other combinations which work between different teams. There are definitely other synergies that are working, but on average, I think that's the most reliable.
It's funny you mention Zarya. Do you think that the reason why the main tanks are so important is because of... when you say that, my brain immediately goes to decision-making. And it seems like Zarya still has that level of decision making because you have to know when to either position aggressively on the high ground, a la Sinatra, when to kind of tank for your Reinhardt because he has to back off because he's getting a little bit pressured by this off-angle diva in the Discord, this, that, the other thing. I think I have to do a little bit more research, but I think Spark does this very well. They're very almost kind of EU goats. In a way where they have their Zarya very much stationary with their Rhine and plays with him and has Bazzi go for playmaking. IDK still makes plays, but Bazzi, again, another player that probably has a lot of first deaths because they're trying to put him forward to make those plays. Do you think... Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is why do you think that the main tank is so specifically important in this meta? Obviously, we can say that it is, but why do you think it is?
I think if you have a vocal main tank that knows how to micromanage his team because he dictates pace.
Sure. True.
He's the micromanager. He's basically like the Abathur of GOATs right now. Because everything works around his pacing, right? I think you might be able to put it on another role, but I don't think it's as effective and as in tune with his cooldowns and everything like this. So I think, for instance, success that Fusions was seeing.
I mean, you say that definition of the main tanks, and it just sounds like you're talking about Fusions.
I also think, for instance, okay, so Bumper is a very strange case, right? So he his success works on completely different metrics, it seems like. For some reason, bumper feeding is way better than other main tanks feeding. Just in the sense of what kind, it's almost like fraggy type of stuff from season 1 with
where there is kind of like almost a plan involved.
Yes. I think there might be. I think there's more than just a necessity to play around a player that can't really adapt his playstyle. I think Bumper's playstyle does work in Runaway. It's not something that they just do in order to make it somehow work because he's a good friend or something. So, I think I wonder how much he calls. But
I think if I remember correctly in the Oversight episode, I think Harsha mentions that he's actually the captain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's necessarily super accurate, but I think he actually does participate quite a bit in comms.
Okay, so yeah, that in itself sort of speaks to that. Yeah, Manode probably does that as well.
I would imagine so.
I'm actually not sure. Do you know what Toronto is like? It's mostly Roki, right?
I don't think so. I think just from talking to Broy, I actually think that they've had to shift their calling structure because I think when Neko was sat out, Aid actually participated heavily in comms. Mm-hmm. If I had to guess, I think it's Envy and Yakpung who are calling primarily.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of 50-50 almost. Roki probably communicates some, but it feels like it's very much around the Diva and the Rhine specifically. So again, kind of still supporting your point.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Bumper, and I kind of want to close the show out on Bumper.
Okay. Here we go.
You bring up an interesting point with this kind of plan around him dying. You mentioned that, and my brain immediately goes to, because we know that the team is so heavily focused around Bumper, and he gets literally every resource you can imagine. The Brig pockets him. He gets every bubble he can. They're not trying to go for these off. I want to say most teams do bubble their Rhine more than the most, right? If we're gonna count how many bubbles go where, Ryan probably gets it the most. But I think for some teams, the second person most bubbled varies. I think sometimes it's Lucio because you need him to go in and get plays. But if you don't have a playmaking Lucio, who's going to make those plays? I think a lot of the time it goes to the Brig. Philly, for instance, sometimes you'll see EQO get bubbles. IDK gets bubbles for Spark, but I also think Bazzi probably gets bubbles quite often if you're going to sit there and meticulously count it out. Do you think that the reason why Titans can succeed when Bumper dies first is because the enemy team has to match so many resources into them, and now it's just completely, you've overcommitted into resources into your own main tank or your own playmaker, that now we have some sort of steam to kind of roll off on in terms of Titans?
I think what is happening is that there has rarely been a team that are space tricksters.
True.
To the degree that Titans are. Like, the amount of cooldowns, and so they have cooldown tracking unreal.
Yes.
They realize where the space is, and they don't have a formula, I don't think.
No, it seems probably intuitive.
Yeah, they're on the fly, just making shit up, and a lot of it is Jano, by the way, who's like that's some highly wrinkled galaxy brain stuff that consistently gets pulled off by this guy, right? In a meta where it's not even necessarily that much about Diva, it is a lot about graph eating, yes, but I mean, unreal at times how he just really tricks teams into giving him the attention, and then also how he demands sometimes the bubble after Bumper's early demise, and then what that does to the rest of the team, how he then places the bombs, generally his bombs, and then it's like it's a stereotype, but it's like this chess piece movement that consistently keeps happening, where runaway. Yeah, always saying Titans is going like, okay, we go here, we go there, they do this, they do that, and now there's a cooldown window where they don't know their checkmate yet. Sure. But here comes the bomb, and boom, it goes off. It's this 3K, and they just win the fight after being 5-6 down, right? I think they just have a way more sophisticated understanding of when you are dead in cooldown situations than any other team, including NYXL, by the way.
Yes,
which then allows them to make it work to that extent. And I think to that style, because space is so important to making that type of thing work, and then also map geometry, they will that just makes it work with Bumper.
Now, obviously, you were pretty vocal to kind of either come to the defense. I don't necessarily think he needs it, but Baroy had mentioned on Oversight that he thought that Bumper might not be Overwatch League caliber, and you kind of clarified and said that, well, that's really not what he meant. What he meant was the style wouldn't really fit on other teams, and from what we know, it sounds like it definitely wouldn't, right? If we were to plug and play him into another team, from what we hear, it didn't look great, right? So it's definitely very much a stylized fit and just kind of works very, very well with them. Are you worried about him for the Titans for the foreseeable future? Because again, fun fact for those of you who don't know, he hasn't really played main tank all that long. On the 19th of March, so in about a week from at least the recording, because we're recording it on the 12th, this will be his 1-year anniversary of playing main tank full time, at least competitively. So he started in Contender Season 1, because in Apex Season 4 we still had Tizzy, we still had Kaiser, I believe, as well, but he didn't see much playtime, but it was mostly Tizzy, right? Contender Season 1 played Winston. If you remember correctly, didn't look great. Season 2, much more improved. Season 3 was gone, right? So where do you think Bumper falls with this team? Do you think it's a liability? Do you think it could be an issue? Do you foresee Titans maybe grabbing a substitute main tank player just in case? Trying to integrate him within the family a little bit so they can at least fall back on something if Bumper doesn't necessarily work out?
So I already told you before the show, it's not a super crystal crisp pattern.
Sure.
But we know of Runaway as the even season Runaway, right? Where in Season 2, and then in Season 4, and then in Contender Season 2, Runaway had finals appearances, of which they famously won the last one with that roster.
Yes.
And between at least the first and the second and the fourth season, Bumper switched roles.
Yep.
Now, if you have an integral player, it does need time to build up. An Apex season is about, let's say, 3 months. 3 months, right? That is also pretty much what other research, for instance, for the Core 4 or whatever, how long it takes for a core to form. I would expect that this is also true because for individual players on new roles, because it is something that grows alongside integrating into a team. So in my mind, it depends on what the new meta is, because I think there is a world where there could be a playstyle for Bumper which he cannot immediately slip into. That is very possible to me. I will say, however, that it also was very possible for him to slip into specific main tank roles. And if that, roles generally, because he switched roles so much and was also very successful at it, I'm less concerned about them for playoffs unless a change comes very late into the season.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
So, no, I'm not concerned. What I will say is, they're basically what Baroy said, right? That like let's address the elephant in the room. Baroy said on Oversight that Bumper would not even be Overwatch League level. What he basically means is, okay, so what people need to understand is Bumper was trialed by everyone who wanted to invest into a hybrid roster, basically, right? And who had the confidence that their war chest could afford him. Let's say that. So what basically this comes from is Baroy looking at the performance that Bumper had and either his ability or his willingness to adapt. And that is, for our purposes, basically the same thing, right?
Sure.
What he saw was not really something that they could build their roster around. And then I will also say it is very likely to me that if you took Mano and put him in Titans, that Titans could work. It is not obvious to me that you put Bumper into NYXL and NYXL works. So that should... by that logic, I think there might be a situation where that becomes a problem in the future for Titans. I will also say that that problem probably won't hold on for long. And I don't think it needs a major fix. I think what we might see is maybe a London-esque season, hopefully not a New York Excelsior-esque season, right? Where your drop-off comes too late in the season.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, it will be... It's still impossible for me to think that a team will just straight up dominate, lose like one match tops per stage and just go through the final and just win it all. I don't think that's possible in Overwatch. Too many metas, too long a season, too big of competition.
I don't know. So I don't know if you want to get into that next or to actually close the show out, but to kind of finish up with Bumper. And this sounds like it would be a joke, right? This what I'm gonna say sounds facetious. That I'm not really serious, but I wonder how much this could be the case. If I'm Runaway, and I'm built as this family, and we're all friends here, and somebody approaches me, says, "Hey, Bumper, I'm willing to throw the checkbook at you. Come play for my team." Why would I? Am I really gonna try if I go into that? I will bring up sandbagging for these players, because this is a team that I've kind of spent my career playing with and around.
Are you saying that in trials?
Yes.
Are you trials willing, not be
not throw, but are you willing to bend your style to this team that you really don't want to play for? Think that's a possibility?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very possible. I also think that if you have 8 tryouts and you can pick where you want to go, then you don't have to give 100% in every tryout.
No, if I don't really want to go here, then I'll show up and I'll try, and maybe I like it when I mid-match. But if you're going into it with the mindset that don't really need it. I got, this amazing team sat behind me of players that I've historically played very well with and around, and I like them very much, and I don't really want to go anywhere. I mean, the money looks nice. Do I have to? No.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something interesting.
I agree.
That, you think that we won't see... Well, okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Dominance in Overwatch seems to be difficult to pull off. Would you agree?
Yes.
Do any of the teams currently strike you with the ability to be dominant this season?
No.
No?
After last week, no.
What about last week kind of triggered alarms?
So NYXL already sort of convinced me that they are mortal in the early season.
Definitely.
And Titans. Yeah. I think they are.
Titans are such a strange bunch because, again, like, I hate to double back because, again, I don't want to keep you all that long, but, you know, we look at Haksal and he's been super, you know, kind of wishy-washy in his positioning historically, right? Now it seems like there's not too much of a problem there, and maybe it's bumper masking that. Who knows? But are they going to be continuously dominant throughout all of these metas? I don't think so. I think that they've got kind of lightning in a bottle here. Do I think they're going to continue out finish the season? I don't know. I'm not necessarily too sure. Playoffs are going to be a big litmus test on how mortal they look and how much preparation really means for this team. Because it seems like, again, talking to Harsha and him talking in interviews, that sometimes prep's not necessarily too hot for some of these teams, and you know, maybe they overlook them a little bit. When we get into playoffs, are they going to take it seriously? I have no idea. No clue. But continue with what you were saying.
I think there's a 10 to 15% chance that we will find out this season that either Haksal or Stitch are washed DPS players.
Sure.
That in itself would pose a big problem. Then again, championships are won by... No. Okay. Seasons are won by tank lines and DPS lines. Grand finals are won by DPS, is what I come to believe.
Yeah. On the day, you're going to need, you know, everybody playing at their max potential. And I guess depending on the meta, you know, if it's a GOATS meta at the seasonal finals, obviously it's going to be hard for a DPS player to necessarily pop off. But no, I would tend to agree. So you don't think any team, New York doesn't inspire faith, Titans doesn't inspire faith? Is there a dark horse?
If anyone, it's New York.
It has to be, right? And I really, this is going to be kind of telling for me specifically. So for the record, I think New York has the best chance, again, that this stage, they've made playoffs. So this is 5 in a row now. Stage playoffs, concurrent, right? If they make the stage finals, does that inspire any hope then? That maybe, yes, they started the season poorly, but they've learned, they've grown, they understand the meta a little bit more, they know how to play around it, they know how to play in it. If they get to the stage finals, at least, they don't have to win, but just getting to 5 consecutive stage finals, does that inspire any kind of faith in terms of dominance?
I think they are the favorites to win. I can tell you that I believe that.
Okay.
No, because I think there's a world where the next meta switch is just too radical, and suddenly you have other teams. Dude, if a Widow meta comes along, I'm not convinced that anyone can hold a candle to Happy, for instance, on NYXL too.
Yeah, that is a tough ask. Pine is good. Happy is another kind of monster.
Dude, Pine is good. Pine is good some matches, like where he's explosive. Yes, if it's a Moto meta, dude, they played Sebiolbi because he is consistent in his performances. Pine is a cliffhanger most of the time. And of course, if Pine goes off, he's one of the most magical players in Overwatch history, right?
Sure.
I won't take it away. Happy is consistently monstrous. Like, I'm sort of feeling giddy for the world to learn what a monster this guy is. I hope a Widowmaker comes. Like, I don't think there is a player for me that I could craft a meta around where I expect the gap to be wider than Happy against the rest of the world.
Who would you say has the best chance? I think immediately everybody's mind goes to Pine. And I would agree. Saya player, Carpe. Carpe has a magic about him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to just compete in a vacuum for a moment, Happy versus the League, who do you think has the best chance? Just a Widow one-on-one. If it is this hyper pocket, the Widow strategy, double sniper-esque, who rivals him, if anybody. I think that's a I don't think it's a cop-out to say that nobody does, but think about it for a moment. I have a Charlie horse.
Do you have a name?
I think if anybody, I would have to say Carpe. There's just something about him picking Widow and just willing the game into existence. I think I was gun shy early on when Philly threw Nepal. I can't remember what match. It was the match that they decided to pick Orisa and McCree and push out into the enemy spawn. But he kind of insta-locks Widow kind of mid-fight and comes back and just starts to win just by pure skill. And that's pretty inspiring. I think Happy's nuts. I think there's a lot of peak players. So players, if I could take them and have them play their best, which again isn't feasible, right? But I think if I could get peak Pine, that would be a good matchup I'd like to see. I'm almost kind of becoming a wrestling or boxing promoter where I'm just trying to make these crazy all-star matchups, but I think peak Pine would be interesting. I think if I could sell Bazzi on actually playing Widow and take away his potato chips, making him actually play Widow again could be a sick match. Pine, Carpe, Saya. He's always been consistent, never super flashy, and I don't think you can. I don't know if he'd be able to match the dominance. Maybe if I don't know.
I got a name for you that you could elaborate on.
Who?
DM.
I think he's probably the weaker of the two Latin brothers. So Carpe and DM kind of, like seize the day. I think that's what that means in Latin. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. But, I think he's probably the weaker of the two. Still very, very good. But DM, I'd have to go back and look. He very, 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 very good Widow. I haven't seen enough of it to say that he can beat Happy. Happy is, to everybody's credit, you heard it from Hex. You're hearing it from Yiska. I'm saying it. He is scary. And you can go back and look at some of my articles. A lot of my evaluation of Guangzhou was going to be if Happy could play. If Happy can play, and he can play Widow and Hitscan, he's going to really outperform people. We're starting to see that he can play. Well, he's not banned, so of course he can play, but he can also, feasibly play Widowmaker on some control map, so... Yeah, that's a toughie. I don't know if anybody is up to snuff.
I'll give you 3 names, okay?
Sure. These are your names. You explain.
Okay. So, I don't think anyone will get close.
Sure.
If I had to name other people than the ones we mentioned, my mind goes to Architect. I think he doesn't have the most sick mechanics.
Think he just big brains him?
But he could just outmove him. Now, next comes a name that... And it's not the most outrageous name yet, but...
Okay.
In my mind, there's something just burning in this kid that wants him to be the guy that imposes on you. And I'm thinking about Striker. Now, this guy is not seeing too much play.
Sure.
So what is he doing with his time? Is he preparing for a specific pick to be relevant? I think yes. He wasn't nowhere near the level that we expect Happy to have last season on Widow. That doesn't mean that he can't grind into it, right?
Sure.
So that in itself is interesting. You wanna hear my ayahuasca pick?
Go for it, buddy. I have a hunch, but I'll let you bury yourself.
Taimu.
I knew it. I knew you were going to go back to that Lindy effect bullshit. I think Taimu's good. Don't get me wrong. Taimu is very good if I can take him at his peak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I can get peak Taimu,
No.
that would be a sick match. West versus
Yeah.
East, 2 historic Widowmaker players. I'd be able to sell that as a promoter every day, all day, right? Is he gonna get there though?
Yeah,
You
I
think
mean,
so?
okay, logically, no. Like everything that commonly you would assume of an Overwatch League player, if I didn't know, like if I was completely shut off from social media and I didn't know about Taimu, then I would just say this guy is on his way out, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Sadly.
if you look into if you look into his career, he has comeback character in his entire career. Whenever he peaked, it was a comeback. He has been kicked from IDDQD. He wasn't playing well for a while when NB wasn't doing well. Last season was terrible. Then he had a couple of good matches where you could see the flashes. You have the story behind mental health issues, panic attacks. That sort of resonates with me because I understand that there's a breaking point where it's actually can be a growth experience. And I also think that what we recently, I mean, if you want to take his word for it, of course, people can write a lot on Twitter, but if that all comes into effect, I still think if you go back, I did it recently. If you go back legitimately to Apex days and you look at Widow Taimu, it's still top level Widows shit that Pine was pulling last season.
Yeah, that is some magic to it.
So,
and you don't just pull that out. That is a characteristic. I think this is an article that I have kind of like very, very rough, but kind of these magical performances that inspire you. Not inspire specific faith, but kind of hint at some sort of trait, some sort of gene that each of these players have that it isn't, you don't see in every other player. You don't see these insane performances, these Pine level performances, these Fleta statistics, these Taimu, magic shows. Carpe, for instance, very similar. Architect, kind of weirdly enough, very slow build up, but you take a Genji player and you put him on Widow and you don't expect that.
Yeah.
And he has that within him. So it's not like he doesn't have the potential. It's just reaching that again. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would be absolutely nothing consistent, right? Like I imagine it to be I'm pretty convinced of the quality of Dallas in general.
Sure.
I think they should make playoffs.
You think
2 to 3 times this season?
Okay.
And in these situations, I think if there's a Widow meta, you don't have a better performer probably on that team. Like that's hilarious because that burning desire shit that I said about Striker, that should probably also apply to Effect.
Sure,
but it's like, don't know. There's something still where I think just like there's no other use than for Taimu on this roster anyway, other than you counting on a Roadhog meta, or you just sit this kid in Widow lobbies all day and just have him grind away, right? Like otherwise you're not going to play him. AKM has shown himself to be a very, very proficient Zarya. You won't play him on Soldier metas over AKM. Like, okay, so Tracer matters is Effect stuff. Like, what else are you going to keep time around if not that? But that, you could do that.
Yes,
and
definitely.
Then you could have Effect for the matches where Taimu is not going to pop off or whatever, and he will give you a consistently good performance. I believe he's capable of on Widow. It also suits his style. So, yeah, I think Taimu can still be a peak player, and if you like that would be a nuts series to have like Guangzhou, let's say in a quarterfinal or something.
What a way to make a comeback!
Yeah, that like in general.
Holy, giving me nerd chills just thinking about Taimu just coming off the bench, coming out of the mountains with that gray beard and just giving it to Happy. That would be something. That would be something.
Yeah, no, it's just it is an outrageous proposition, but it's also something that has some empirical evidence
Yeah, I
to
wouldn't
support
say
it
it's
from his career. Yeah,
it's not logical, but I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility.
yeah,
It would take a lot of effort, but I don't think it's unreasonable. I don't think it's that crazy.
yeah.
But Happy is a monster waiting to gobble up the Overwatch League if we get a Widow meta, or just I don't even think it's necessarily Widow. I think it probably would just be a hit scan meta. Widow specifically probably would be his most dominant, but I think you put him on a lot of different heroes hit scan wise. I think McCree,
Yeah.
if there's a weird Ashe meta, I have no idea. I think he probably still pops off.
The problem is, as soon as I think McCree, I don't think Happy is as imposing as he was on Widow. Like, then my mind goes to Glister for some reason.
Glister?
Yeah, as like the best McCree.
I don't think I've ever seen Glister play McCree, and that's probably due to my ignorance, not necessarily him not playing.
Dude, it's nuts. Like, they were playing last season, they were playing it into Sombra, and he would like hear the Sombra behind him ult, and
like spin and flash.
He spins and flashes, doesn't cancel the MP, but before the Sombra drops or hits the ground, she's dead because of 2 headshots. And you did that in one series like 3 or 4 times. It was nuts.
Guess I'm gonna have to go hunting. That seems very impressive. That seems very, very impressive. I think there are some. I think McCree would be a tougher test for him. But yeah, if there was a Widow meta, it would be tough to hold a candle. But yeah, we've gone on almost an hour and 40 minutes. I'll let you kind of close the show. The last little bit is yours. What's coming out? Where can people follow you? Anything coming on the horizon?
It's always like every second day, pretty much on VP Esports articles. I'm currently working on some things, some observations about the general structure of franchise leagues and what that means for players and what that means for certain positions, and specifically the general manager. And then I have a second piece coming out how negativity improved Overwatch League, which is sort of like a little bit perplexing, but yeah, I think there's merit to the argument.
Interesting. Negativity meaning conflict?
Meaning calling a spade when someone is bad, then
Fair enough.
That's actually positive for the entire experience.
Fair enough. And obviously, under Yiska's face, you can see his Twitter handle. Definitely go follow him. Probably the most insightful Twitter on unbiased Twitter account in Overwatch Esports.
I'm not even tweeting that much at the moment, though.
Yeah, but you got some.
Sometimes you're not feeling
gold
it, right?
ones, though. Yes, I think that's when you're gonna get the peak Yiska experience, when it's not forced and it's just like, I'll tweet today. I like this idea. This is my thought for today. You're gonna get some gold ones out of him. So definitely go follow him. If you like my content and all that jazz, you know where to find me. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, buddy. And I'm sure this won't be the last time.
No problem.
We chit chat on the podcast. But whatever episode this is, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Smash and dab that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.